Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, and the 1,000 Immunones project. So this is a project that Stanford and Buck Institute have been running for the last few years, and they're using data and AI and big data sets to sort of look at what are the immune factors that we can actually measure that will actually indicate what is going when your immune system's going awry. So they've discovered a whole lot of different factors, like tumor necrosis factor alpha and IL-6 and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
CRP and
CXCL9.
CXCL9,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially, which we'll get into later, into that one in particular. But just coming back to that whole immune piece, as you've said, is the key factor. So instead of going after all the 12 hallmarks of aging that we now, have these 12 hallmarks of aging, and there seems to be more at it all the time. But if we actually look at the basis, it's the immune system, because
Right.
all of the
And the
things
immune
are
system
going
is
to be
there, and then the 12 hallmarks of aging are here. So let's
yeah,
work here, and we're to
going to
secondarily
affect a
affect all
lot.
those things without
Yeah.
adding 1,000 more supplements to affect every one of those 12 hallmarks of aging. Now we can address the immune system and hopefully address all of those things secondarily. And
Yeah.
you're not taking 50 supplements, you're taking, one or two things.
And what you said there about the barriers, like you talked about the gut barrier, but actually it's not even just the gut barrier.
Yeah, you're right.
There's barriers right throughout the body, our reproductive tract, our eyes, even our lungs, our cardiovascular, all of these interfaces where the outside of the body has an interface with the inside of the body, has an army of, IgA and IgG and all of these immunoglobulins at the border of the fort, if you like, because if you think about the lining of your gut, the lining of your lungs, all of these things are the interface with the outside world. So if this was your castle, where would you put the soldiers? You'd put them at the gates, right? You'd put them at the walls. So
that's
they
a great,
protect.
yeah, I love that. The brain too, right? The same thing too with the
Yep.
brain. If we can keep these pathogens away from the brain, we know now we've linked, for instance, neurodegenerative diseases to things like herpes viruses, lymphomas to Epstein-Barr virus. So you're right. If we could stop the entry zone, if we could improve the blood-brain barrier, if we could improve the gut integrity, if we can improve the integrity of the lung mucosa. Now, when I breathe in a pathogen, it doesn't have a route to start this immune process. So
Yeah.
I love that
And
analogy of put your soldiers at the gate.
But I love that. I think that's a fort. And if you picture like the gut microbiome, for example, or the gut barrier is having different layers. You've got your actual physical layer, that one sort of cell thick endothelial lining. You've got your actual immunoglobulins. You've got your microbiome, which is actually there, and you've got your mucosa. Your mucous membranes. And in the mucous membranes, you talk about when you do microbiome testing, we look at secretory IgA, and if that's low, then we know that when the bugs are coming in on your food with the pathogens, you're not going to be able to trap them in that mucus and get them gone, dealt with if you've got low secretory IgA. So we're always looking for ways to improve that mucosa, and that's, as you said, prebiotics is a big factor in there, because it actually is the fiber matrix of the mucosa, and it's feeding the good bacteria, and so understanding that, number one, the immune system is the key that we need to be going after. Number two, a big factor of that is the microbiome and the gut health, right? That is connected to that. And number three is the barriers to entry in all of the orifices of the body, basically from your vagina to your eyes to your lungs. All of these areas need to
think
be
of all these areas where
strengthened.
things can enter into our body.
Yeah. And so how do we do that, Betsy? Like what can we do to target some of these things? What have you used in your practice?
I think that in my practice, we sort of look at, okay, well, if I try to address things like the thymus gland, then we can use bioregular peptides or thymosin alpha-1. So some of the thymic peptides can sort of improve that thymic function. It's hard to improve thymic function short of using things like bioregulators, things that actually give you back what the thymus gland is not making, because I can't regenerate a thymus gland yet. Maybe we'll be able to at some point. We're certainly moving down that road that we can regenerate some of these organs, right? If you're in France, you eat sweetbreads because it's eating thymus gland, but that probably doesn't work so well. Probably a lot of those are just digested. So if you can use things that are bioregulators, there's thymogen, there's bioregulator peptides that are thymic peptides that are bioregulators to help improve thymic function. Will that be one of the keys, since we need to improve the thymus gland? And then, you know, where do I look when I'm looking at gut health, aside from all the things we talked about, right? Is eating a high protein, lower carb diet, eating a lot of fiber, making sure you're getting fermented foods, make sure you're exercising, all those things you guys know. But if you look at how we're made, where does the gut first get its health? And that's from, so if we naturally want to do this the way our bodies were designed to, it's from colostrum, right? The very first fluid that's produced from the mammary glands of females right after birth, right? Immediately after birth. It's the reason it's so important, even if you're not going to nurse your baby, that they suck on your breast, is that colostrum that's produced is it provides all this passive immunity to the fetus. So basically, humans actually have the ability to get some antibodies from the placenta that pass from the mother to the baby, so they get some antibodies. Some other animals, like cows, actually don't. So bovine colostrum is actually really powerful because all the baby cow's immune system comes from the colostrum itself.
Yeah. Wow.
And so colostrum is hugely protective. And one of the ways it's doing that is by getting the gut healthy immediately. You know, it's also full of, you know, cytokines, and, you know, so both pro-inflammatory cytokines and anti-inflammatory cytokines that are immune modulating agents. You don't want to just have anti-inflammatory. You want a combination of both. You want to get the immune system a little bit stimulated with the pro-inflammatory things, but then you want anti-inflammatory to calm it back down. So you've got, you know, cytokines, you've got immunoglobulin A, immunoglobulin G. So you've got all of these immunoglobulins. You've got growth factors. You have antimicrobial compounds. You have some of the maternal immune cells. So actually, there's actually immune cells, some of the T cells that are actually in, and B cells that are in colostrum that come from the mother. So we know that supportive properties of colostrum are huge, and also to repairing the gut. So one of the things we know colostrum does also is it contains some ingredients that actually are healing to the tight junctions of the gut. So we can actually repair the gut. The infant's not born with a very mature gut.
No,
so
it's permeable.
Yeah. It's super permeable. Exactly. Just like our guts after they've been insulted.
Exactly.
And so if we look at I think it's always best to look at, the body was very cleverly designed by somebody. And that clever design, if we go back to our basics of, well, how did the body do this? How were we meant to do this? I think colostrum's a really cool way of doing that, right?
Yeah.
So it contains so many amazing things that it, you know, I think, you know, we know very well that there's studies, actually the studies that showed it was better than pharmaceutical drugs in a number of clinical applications, that it actually had better immune properties than vaccines for a number of diseases.
Yeah, like three times the flu.
Yeah.
Like 3 times
for
more
flu
effective than the
for
flu
Yeah.
vaccine. Yeah, to stop it. Yeah.
So, you know, upper respiratory illness is super protective for us. So yeah. So I think that why don't we try and do this in a natural way, the way the body does? And because bovine colostrum is even more potent than ours, then that would be the way to go. But then you and I were talking a while back, and we sort of got in this conversation about all this and said, well, okay, so it's got all this cool stuff, right? But what if we could take the cool stuff out of it and
magnify it?
And yeah, just have the cool stuff, right? And not have any of the other stuff in there, because there's a lot of things in there that we don't need. So, you know,
yeah, the fat and the lactose and the you know, all the protein, which is good, but you don't want,
but right, you don't need to overwhelm your system with all that. And so if we could just take all the really cool magic out of it, right? So I always sort of picture it as, okay, I can only, if I have ping pong balls full of sand, I could only take in so many ping pong balls, but I could fill up a lot of sand. So if I could take the sand out of the colostrum, if I could take those bioactive particles out of the colostrum, wouldn't that be cool? And that's kind of got us down the road of looking for, you know, does that exist? Is there some way to do that? Is there a way to actually do it? And you, through some of your relationships, kind of stumbled onto this company, Quantec, who had found that they could actually isolate these bioactive proteins, these bioactive components from the, you know, the colostrum extracts, right, from the serum colostrum, and come up with this from the serum, and come up with this product that they call IDP, or immune defense protein. And it contained significantly more than the colostrum itself. So if I take a scoop of colostrum, this would be like if I took 50 scoops of the colostrum,
Yeah.
the bioactive components that were in there. Um,
Yeah.
and so we tried to get our hands on this product, right? It's not really widely available. It's nowhere in the US, and pretty, and not particularly distributed anywhere. So that ingredient of IDP really is, I think, whereas colostrum is this sort of one-dimensional story.
Mm.
Now we've got this pure bioactive ingredient that doesn't have any of the casein or the lactose or the fat, and that this sort of the synergistic effect of all these bioactives put together. And you can also you can test, whereas different colostrum is going to have different bioactive ingredients. It's going to depend on the source where you got it from. It's going to always be different. It's not, there's no way to say, okay, this always has this ingredients in it, but you can actually do that with the IDP, because you can actually now test these and say, okay, this has this amount of these bioactive proteins in it. Because with serum protein electrophoresis, you can identify each of those and say, yes, we can say this has this much of the
which is fabulous, right? Because when we've been able to standardize it and make sure that it is each batch is
that's the product you're getting.
It is 100% what you're getting. And the IDP actually comes from the whey. So it's a suite of 50 bioactive molecules that actually work in synergy together. So the way Quantec were doing this, and I have interviewed Dr. Rod Clackham a couple of times, the founder of Quantec, and they were actually looking at lactoferrin. So this was a lactoferrin story, and lactoferrin has been known for a long time to have
like I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about lactoferrin, and it's health benefits, which is huge, right?
Which is huge. Yeah, it's really big. And then they started to purify the lactoferrin, thinking that they'd make it stronger and better quality lactoferrin, right? And they actually found that when they purified it, the more they purified it, the less activity it had, the less bioactivity it had. And then they were like, why, it should be getting stronger. But what they discovered in that journey was that it was the 50 bioactives working in synergy. And we see this a lot in nature, right? When we take, sometimes it's good to take an extract out of something, but when it's like the spermidine story, like spermidine, you're a huge fan, I'm a huge fan of, and spermidine is fabulous. But when I looked at putting spermidine into different formulations, we were looking at synthetic versus the natural spermidine, and the natural spermidine had a little bit of putrescine and a little bit of spermine in it.
Right. Yeah, it's a full polyamine complex, and they found that was so much more effective. Yeah, exactly what you're saying here. You need the synergy of all of these components together, and when you tried to isolate it down to one component, its efficacy was markedly decreased. Yeah, so you kind of consider, like, okay, you have these, you've got milk, and then lactoferrin, and now IDP, which is the
third
generation of that. Yeah, I think the other thing is that you can't really, you can extract these bioactives from pasteurized skim milk with really very minimal heat. So there's very few colostrum products that actually are using some heat to extract the colostrum. Yeah, and so they
lose their bioactivity.
They lose the bioactivity, right? Yeah. So and so we know that by not using heat to extract these bioactives, we're keeping them. And again, I really appreciate that I could write to the company and say, show me the batch of how much bioactives in this, and they can, for each batch, show you what's in it. There's no way you can do that with colostrum. It's absolutely impossible, because no batch is going to be exactly the same, right? Yeah, it's just not. It's impossible.
And you need to know where it's coming from, and the quality of the cows, and the grass fed and all of that sort of stuff, and that this is coming from New Zealand. New Zealand has some very strict laws in that regard, and the quality of the product is really, really high, right? So you're starting off with a good product. Yeah,
and I think people forget about that, right? They buy all their organic groceries and their organic milk and things like that, and then they go and they buy some colostrum, and they don't really look, where did that come from? Because more than anything else, that's going to even have a condensed amount of any impurities or toxins in it than if I drank the non-organic milk from a non-grass-fed cow or whatever. It's really hard here in the US, quite honestly, to get a really quality milk. I actually use, the thing about milk is you're not taking in a ton of one time, but if you're looking at whey protein or then colostrum, or
You
then
are.
it's next thing IDP, you're getting a lot because now we're condensing everything down. It's like the whey protein I use is only from a New Zealand extract, whey,
Yeah.
because because those cows are grass fed, much more pure. There's less toxins. There's much more strict regulations on farming there than there is here, even organic farms. So I think that is really key. And I think people forget that when they're buying products. Where did this actually come from? I see people all the time. They buy their organic whey protein. Even organic whey protein actually probably has tons of toxins in it. So that's why we use when I'm using a whey protein, and I still will use whey protein even if I get my hands on this product, that has an IDP, then I will still use a whey protein because there's advantages. I get the amino
With
acids. I
it is
want
you're getting
all that
amino
complex. There's still
acids.
other, right? I'm getting the protein source. So
Yep.
it's not like this is, but now I'm getting a condensed form of all those things that I need to support my immune system.
Yeah, and it's that bioactive part of it, right? With whey, you're getting the protein, you're getting the alpha lac and the beta lac and the amino acids, and they're doing good things in your body, and they're helping you build muscle and so on and so forth. But they're not actually the bioactives that are actually helping your immune system. So this is the difference between having a whey protein and with IDP, it's 10 liters of milk to get 1 gram of IDP, right? So you'd have to drink a
you drink a lot of milk, right?
And then you're going to get the fat and the sugar and the all the
right.
other things that come in milk.
Right.
So this is like a superfood. And if you think of, going back to the colostrum story, the colostrum is nature's evolutionary superfood. I don't like using that word because it's overused, but it is the word.
But it truly is.
But it is, because this is what we give our most vulnerable, like our babies who have no immune system or bugger all of an immune system and very poor, barriers. This is what nature provided to speed up the process of development, of organ development and brain development and everything else. And they've shown that even like talking about breastfed infants versus infants that haven't had colostrum, especially, and breastfed, that they are their entire lives they are prone to more.
Their immune systems are not as good. Their gut is not as healthy, and when that secondarily is affecting their brain function, and that's because that we go back to that repairing the gut integrity. That this is what gets that gut integrity repaired too. So whether it's an infant who's born with poor gut integrity or us who have developed poor gut integrity, we're going to repair that by using these bioactive ingredients. And you were talking to me about a lot of the importance of a lot of these bioactives is not just even for the infant, but actually for the mother itself, right? That the direct effect of these immune defense proteins on the maternal health
of the mother
is critical.
Right.
That there's a big piece there. So, so these are that powerful. They are actually keeping the mother from getting sick, giving the baby it's full. Again, in a cow, it's the full immune system. They had to get everything there. It's what got their immune system there. It's what kept their immune system healthy. So you have to look at wow, what is the potency now to me who has this damaged immune system, damaged gut, has does not have the thymic function. Can I use this and prevent it? And the data is there. So there is, IDP was tested in a US lab. They tested it with influenza and adenovirus and COVID. So, more recently COVID, and they used actually lactoferrin as their control because they knew lactoferrin was actually a really good antiviral and it was better. So the IDP actually performed better than the vaccines at preventing these diseases.
Better than the vaccine.
Huge potential against viruses, but also bacteria. So another study looking at other pathogens like Staph aureus, those harmful organisms that are and IDP had a really good effect at killing off bacteria as well. In some cases, better than antibiotics at killing off bacteria. So now
and
we
selectively too.
Exactly. It didn't kill off any of the good.
No,
bacteria,
the good.
Right?
So it supports.
So none of the good bacteria, none of the good microbiome, completely spared.
Yeah.
So now if we have somebody who has SIBO, for instance, or something like that, and we can give them IDP, so we're sparing instead of wiping out all their microbiome, giving them Xifaxan or something. Well, now I can actually selectively get rid of all the pathogens and protect and rebuild their gut health, which is going to be what honestly cures them, right? And not disturb their innate immune system pathogens, the good ones that are in there to help us. That's huge, and there's not a lot that does that, right?
No, and the reason, if you go back to Dr. Rod from Context said to me, if you think about it, that makes full sense, because in the cow they wanted to, they needed a product or a thing that would selectively take out the bad stuff and leave the good stuff, and that's evolved over 300 millennia, like however long mammals have been around evolving these types of things to actually kill the bad bacteria, and it supports lactobacillus specifically and bifidobacterium, which are two of the major species that we really
most important
need.
ones.
Yeah, and so that's IDP. So when Betsy and I were scouring the world for things to go after this immune senescence problem, because we're facing
that's what Lisa and I do. We think, God, wouldn't it be cool if, and then we go and see if the if
go so we can find someone who's doing that, find some crazy amazing scientist who's done this, and go, finally we found it, and we'll put this together with that, and then we'll do this, and that's what we've been doing actually for the last year and a half, and we've got a fabulous team of people behind us. Shout out to Peter and everyone at Longevity Launch for all the hard work that have been going into this. But we've gone and got IDP, and we've put it, then we went, okay, so we've ticked off some of the boxes of immunosenescence with this one product. We've lowered IL-6, we've lowered tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are two aging cytokines that increase with age. We've attacked that with IDP. What else have we done with
the gut? We've repaired the microbiome. We've restored the tight junctions in everywhere, lungs, brain, gut. So we've repaired all those, the integrity of the membranes. So we've gotten things in a really good place.